So welcome one and all to the first thematic session of INSIC 2021, the duration of which will be 30 minutes, in which 5 minutes are reserved for Q&A. You can type your questions in the chat box, if any, and we will take it from there if time permits. Now, let me introduce you all to our esteemed guest speaker of the day, Dr. Olivier Crepin-Leblond. He's the chair of UK Chapter Internet Society and ex-chair of At-Large Advisory Committee, ALAC ICANN. He wears many hats. For more information about him, you can visit our website. He has been part of INSIC since the very first edition in Hyderabad. He's one of my favorite speakers here in INSIC. Today, he will be speaking to you about internet governance, perspectives on the current and future. Over to you, Dr. Olivier.
Thank you very much, and thank you for letting me once again to go through this introduction to the history of the internet and some of the main component parts of how we managed to get to where we are today. Let me see if I can share my screen. And yes, it seems that it's working. So let me know how that is coming along. And I guess I need to share it. Is that sharing properly? No, that's not sharing properly. Can you see this? No. Screen sharing has stopped. Let me start again.
मेरा 25 मिनट 20 मिनट बाद 8 बजे
तो हम टीवी लगा लें या अभी नहीं
नहीं भाई अंदर लगाओ.
Apologies for this. I seem to have a problem here with screen sharing. Did you enable it for me?
Shall I screen share for you? If
yes, you are, Olivier, you are a co-host, so
okay.
You should be able to do so.
Let me try it again, because I'm obviously totally inept at getting these things to run properly, which is certainly a problem, but let's find out if it works now. Screen share INSIG. Do I have the right document? I can't seem to see the window that I need to share. That's really strange.
No worries. Shweta will share it,
yeah,
Olivier.
I can share this screen. Just give me a moment.
Oh, here we go. Sorry about this. I seem to now be able to do it. Okay. Let me go into the... There we are. Can you see it now?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Perfect. Apologies for this. This is not a good start for me. I really am sorry. So there we are. We started with this, and I think that is it me that's sharing at the moment, or it is? Okay, excellent. So I'm going to take you through the current state and future perspective of what's happening out there on the internet, how we got to where we are today. And I guess the first thing that we need to look at is the different waves of internet governance that we've had. So the phases that the internet went through. It started with the military that constructed the DARPANET, all paid for by the US taxpayers. And that was as a response to the Russians sending Sputnik into space. So the US launched two big initiatives, or several big initiatives, but two of which were, one, sent someone on the moon, two, put together a network of networks that would get all the military networks working together. And they managed to tick the box in both of them. And so the DARPANET was born very, just at the edge. Then it became academic as more and more universities with their research department ended up joining. Then it became commercial in the 2000s and sort of 90s and 2000s when the World Wide Web was invented. It then became mass media when we had YouTube and all the videos, the voice services, etc. So not just text, but all of the streaming things that went on. And that's when the World Summit on the Information Society, the WSIS, started. That's where the issue of internet governance as such started. And then the fifth wave was everybody and everything from 2010 onwards, with the higher, faster connectivity and with the apps. And of course, with the advent now of 4G, 5G, and the Internet of Things. So really something that keeps on moving all the time. So how did it all start? Well, it started first as a set of standards and so on, saying, well, we need to develop a network, and that was over in the 1960s. The technical specifications are basically designed by the Internet Engineering Task Force. It's a multi-stakeholder environment, so they allow anyone to go and take part in standards development. It's a distributed system. There's no single owner on the Internet. It's a distributed network of networks. So what you end up with is the whole set of networks around are effectively coordinating with each other and talking to each other. And the technical specifications are all shared by the different networks. So you're able to talk between one network and the other. The only single thing that is there on the Internet is the domain name system, a distributed way of naming the computers so that you don't have to remember IP addresses, the numbers. It's easier to remember names. And the whole hierarchy has got a single root that is run by an organization called ICANN. We'll speak about it in a moment. And it's fully distributed around the world. There are a lot of organizations that are involved with internet governance, as you can see, and with running the internet itself. You'll see that some of them are governments, some of them are non-governmental organizations, but in there you'll also find organizations like the World Wide Web Consortium, the regional internet registries. We'll be speaking about all of these in a moment. But it's a whole ecosystem that has managed to run the internet and develop it to what it is today without a single owner, if you want, to coordinate absolutely everything. It all started, like everything, with just two nodes. The ARPA network in September 1969, just two things connected to each other, both in close to each other, and it sent a message along and it worked. And a few months later, they managed to connect a few more computers. And of course, there are several different stages of growth, but it grew pretty fast. And as it grew, the first thing that needed to be done was some hierarchy to what the standards were. And the standards, so that everyone could operate on the same standards, the standards were called request for comment, because they're not really standards. You can adopt them or not adopt them, but it's a bit like everything on the internet. It's in your advantage to agree with whatever is proposed as a standard, because if you don't, then whatever you're doing is not going to work with everything else. So they're open. They also are optional, but although they're optional, everyone follows them because that's how you get your service to work with everything else out there. The internet grew super fast, and by 1973, it had a problem with the protocols that it was using, which was originally, remember, for this military network. And so TCP/IP, Transfer Control Protocol / Internet Protocol, was designed by Bob Kahn and Vint Cerf. You will have heard from Vint Cerf earlier, one of the fathers, the two fathers of the internet and the fathers of TCP/IP. And this TCP/IP is still used today for all of the network traffic that happens on the internet. So it's really resilient, judging from something that was designed back in 1974. When the network grew, it started growing into separate networks that closed themselves off from the rest of the world. So Milnet, for example, became its own network with just a few gateways. And one of the reasons, of course, was that as you had more college students coming onto the internet, and some films, which I guess glamorized the idea that you could go and start to hack military networks for fun. They got a lot of college students trying to hack them, and of course they weren't too pleased about that. So they made their own network, and you can see that by 85 the network was really growing very much. And it's growing so much that initially all the naming was under something.arpa. And that wouldn't work because there was a main space where you had one person having to constantly update the host list, the system by which you translate between an address and an IP address. And as the network started growing super fast, you couldn't keep up with this. So they introduced the domain name system, which is a hierarchy with a top-level domains, and we'll see that in a moment. And the first top-level domains that were introduced were mil, gov, com, net, org, edu. And then there were also some other top-level domains that were based around country codes that were introduced. And for India, for example, it's IN. For the United Kingdom, it's UK. For Germany, it's DE, etc., etc. So that's how it all started. That's in 1985, and there was a day when they switched between one system and the other system. The advantage with this is that everyone is in charge of their own little part. So the military is in charge of mil, government in charge of gov, and then commercial can be, well, there's one organization that's in charge of the domain names under that, but then when you've got hosts underneath this, so computers underneath those domain names, let's say I have 10 computers under myname.com, then I'm in charge of naming those 10 computers. And that's the way to distribute the system around. In 1989, the military network separated itself completely, and a lot of the traffic on the internet was commercial. We can see from 80,000 nodes in January, they reached 160,000 in November. And that was a real push on the US taxpayer because it was still paid for by them. And so PSI, UUNet, and ANS Core, that became commercial organizations, started offering, starting off to offer internet service for a commercial basis, said, let's start a thing, let's have an overlay network. And then the next year, they founded Commercial Internet Exchange, the first Internet Exchange Point, IXP, which was the basis for all the Internet Exchange Points that we ended up having around the world. And the way that it works is that you exchange traffic between the different networks, and it's a peer-to-peer traffic. So I carry your traffic, you carry my traffic, provided traffic originating from both networks is about the same. And of course, beyond that, it's gone into other types of commercial arrangements between networks. But there's not a single network that carries all the traffic. And this is why these peer agreements are really important. And the concept of Internet Exchange Points, really important too. In 1990 and 91, we still had very early day internet services, not very, I mean, they were commercial. Email was commercial, but there wasn't the World Wide Web. So everything was text-based and not really particularly exciting as far as the general public was concerned. You can see here Gopher, that's a service that you could use. So that's the ancestor to the World Wide Web. It was hypertext based. So you could use you couldn't use your mouse because your computer wasn't good enough for that back then. You could use the arrow keys on your keyboard to go up and down, or you could press number 6 and you'd get international dialing codes. You could press also, I think, the tab key and it would jump from one line to another. But it wasn't really that exciting. It was doing the job. But then Tim Berners-Lee came along, and he was at CERN, and he felt that the other services were a bit difficult for his colleagues who were not so computer literate. When he wanted to present papers, he needed them to be looking good with nice type space and with pictures, perhaps even voice notes on it. And they also had to be hypertext linked. And that's how he developed this. And the PC started becoming more powerful, so you could run that on a PC. And the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign had a research group that said, let's develop a browser, and that was NCSA Mosaic. NCSA Mosaic looks like this. That's one of the first pages that was created on the internet. It's when IBM went online. That's a page that I downloaded back then. And it's interesting because you can see here, the big difference is you've got pictures. Of course, that's in black and white, but I think it was in color when you were on a color terminal. You had a few colors, not that many, a bit grainy, unfortunately. The network was a bit slow, so you couldn't have high quality pictures. But then if you look underneath Lou Gerstner, you'll find there's a little box here that says, listen, or more, or there's a little loudspeaker. And yes, you could have sound, you could have the guy speaking. Wow, such a change. There wasn't really video at the time because you would need to be in a really good place to good quality network connectivity to be able to download video. It would crawl into it, but voice was really, really good. And at that point, of course, the whole thing exploded. You had lots of different services that came up. So the first commercial web browser, Netscape, which was actually people from the NCSA Mosaic project, students that left that and they created Netscape. There were some crawlers. Yahoo started, then Alta Vista, then Ask Jeeves. And then Google. Google came rather late, 1998, and it looked at what all the other people had done before and made it better. So sometimes the first mover advantage is not the best advantage. Sometimes you can wait, see how everyone else does things, and then do it better, and you get the whole market. You can see in 2005, YouTube also started. YouTube was independent of Google, and Google purchased it afterwards. So you can see how by 2005, the network was fast enough for video. you can see the difference between November 93. So the countries that are in the checker, yellow and red are the countries that had full internet access already in November 93. And full internet access, that means, maybe a couple of nodes. I think that in India, it was shakti.ernet.in, Ernet being the research network. And that was it. There was just a handful of machines in universities that were, or research network that were running. But by 1997, you can see how the spread went everywhere. And of course, those countries that were early movers, they had much better internet connectivity. This is just in a few years. And imagine if it was just a single organization or a single coordinating body that would have had to do this, to go from this to this in just a few years, totally impossible. It's just because it was distributed that it went so fast. Very quickly, you ended up seeing a huge amount of infrastructure across the world. Satellite links, some of these links under the sea, these are undersea cables. And remember, each one of these satellites involves building the darn thing, putting it on a rocket, and then shooting the thing in space. Sometimes it doesn't work and the whole thing blows up. You've got to start again. And when it comes down to put cables under the sea, you have to go across, and sometimes you have bad weather, and it's a huge amount of investment. That just in a few years from what there was before. One of the things is the end user principle in the internet is so important. Any type of traffic is allowed. There's no filtering. It's a champion for innovation, and the smallest startup can come up with an idea and then propose it on the internet. Well, could, because actually that's in the early days. Now, it has changed in some ways, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. So internet governance, as I said, all the way up to about 2005, there was really no definition until the WSIS had this world working group on internet governance. There was a UN-based working group that looked at it and found a definition for it. And very soon enough, you'll find out that the internet governance is not just the technology, but there's a whole lot of other topics that are involved with this: social, cultural, human rights, economic development, etc. And then there's a whole number of organizations that are involved, from ICANN to the United Nations, UNESCO, the World Trade Organizations, the European Commission, increasingly, the OECD, lots and lots and lots of organizations involved, and they're all working together in a multi-stakeholder manner to build the edifice. And the internet is constantly being built because it constantly has to move. Let's look at a few of these organizations. The Internet Society, that was founded by those very people that built the network. Vint Cerf was one of the founding members of the Internet Society back in 1992, and it was one that became the legal home for the Internet Engineering Task Force, so that it could actually publish things, and it could be spread and supported worldwide, and meetings could be arranged, etc. And the Internet Society is really dedicated to the open development of the internet, and the whole point that the internet should be for everyone. It's got chapters around the world. I think that map is probably a little bit out of date, but you can probably see a few of the chapters there. The China one is on it, so that's cool. I'm not sure. Yeah, the others too. Good. And then, of course, it's the organizational home for the Internet Architecture Board and the IETF. IETF deals with the standards. The Internet Architecture Board deals with a more strategic view of where things should go as far as the Internet architecture is concerned. ICANN is the organization that deals with the coordination of the top-level domains around the world. So it deals with domain names and IP addresses. It took over these functions in the late 90s from the US government, because prior to that, everything was government run, and it wasn't run that efficiently. So it was a good thing that they took over, and they organized all sorts of groups. And we're not going to go into details on ICANN. You can read about it, and I'm sure you'll learn about it. But it really is doing a great job in coordinating the domain names and dealing with all the policy revolving around the top-level domains. Then you got the root servers. So I mentioned to you this whole system of root servers around the world that basically deal with the DNS. So they support the domain name system. They have all the top-level domains in there. It's used by all the services. Originally, there were 13 root servers, most of which were based in the United States. And that was a huge problem for many people, because they thought, politically speaking, this internet thing is really run by the US. But as time went on, and this is the latest numbers, you now have instances of the root servers everywhere around the world. And that makes the internet a lot more resilient than ever before, because wherever you are, there is a root server that is located close to you. The advantage of a root server is when you do a search for something like insig.in, then you press insig.in and it will go over to the closest root server to find out where .in is dealt with. And so if you have a root server close to you, the answer comes very, very quickly. And it doesn't have to go long distance to come back to you. So that's why there's so many of them, and it grows every single day. Every time I show this presentation, I have to add more. Just a few, like a couple of months ago, there were 100 less than there are now. So the regional internet registries deal with the allocation of the IP addresses. So every computer on the internet needs an internet protocol address. It's a number, a set of numbers. And they've got 5 regions there. You can see how the regions are shared, and India is in the APNIC region, and it does both the IPv4 addresses, the standard ones from back in the day, and then the new ones, the IPv6, which have a much larger address space. The World Wide Web Consortium deals with the web browser. So all the standards relating to HTML, to how people browse the web through their, whether they're using Mozilla, or whether they're using the Internet Explorer or Opera or whichever, all of the standards are done in the World Wide Web Consortium. The ITU is also involved. Now, they've been around since way before the internet, as you know, and they were very active prior to internet days, but then they kind of missed the boat a little bit as far as the internet was concerned. And they were still very much involved with all the radio communication and spectrum and so on. And they have some various working groups that work in both the development field and also the technical field. The left-hand side is all the radio things, which they're very, very much up, they coordinate all that basically. The World Conference on International Telecommunications was the last big conference that the ITU organized to try and update the international telecommunication regulations. It didn't go too well, and so the regulations are still, whatever it is today that the internet runs on continues to run on. There's no actual real country-like regulation or worldwide regulation that countries have agreed on. The World Telecommunication Policy Forum was held in May, was it 2013? So just a year after, to try and slow things down a little bit and try to move forward with regulations. But ever since then, nothing really has been agreed, because at the moment you discuss internet, there is this political component that comes to it, especially in UN circles, or well, in the ITU circles, sorry. So that's why the next big meeting is going to be in Geneva in December 2021. We'll see how that goes. There are others that take place. World Telecommunication Development Conference, more focused on the development of the internet. And then there's also the Plenipotentiary Conference, the last of which took place in November 2018. And the next one, I think, will be next year. Of course, these conferences were all face-to-face, but these days it's a bit difficult to carry those. Now, the United Nations processes incorporate various different processes, but of course, the one that we're going to focus on is the Internet Governance Forum, where people from around the world are coming together, and it's all part of the WSIS agenda and the WSIS +10 review, where it basically had a number of things, and one of those action lines was to create the Internet Governance Forum. The other one was to do with the effectiveness of the other development of the internet that they wanted to have. Let's go into the Internet Governance Forum. I'll focus on that very briefly. I know that time flies when I speak. The next one is going to be from the 6th to the 10th of December. It's going to be a hybrid meeting for the first time in a long time. Last year was all online. And it's a platform that enables multi-stakeholder discussion between the different component parts, so civil society, government, private sector, technical community, and educational community, to come together and work to discuss topics, and then maybe come up with some action lines that can be actioned by others, and decisions that can be actioned elsewhere. There are also a lot of national and regional internet governance fora. This is a map from a couple of years ago. They used to meet face-to-face. Many of them met this year by being online, and maybe you have been able to take part in some of them. In some way, it's good because it becomes more inclusive, having more people. But in another way, it's difficult because a lot of the discussions that take place are more effective when you're face to face than when you're behind a screen. There's always a struggle between multilateral and, oops, what's happened now? Have I just crashed or something? I think I might have crashed. This is very bizarre.
You can share the screen again.
I will.
Yeah, Shweta, you can share it.
The whole thing has crashed for some reason. Let me go back to the... This is interesting.
We can see and hear you, Olivia, but I
You
guess
can
something's
see
happened
me.
at your end.
Yeah, I just need to share the screen again. And are we back? Or has screen sharing stopped now? This is not helping me today. So the gremlins have really gone full speed. All right, no worries. We're there. We're going to go all the way down to where we need to be. Tuck, 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 tuck. All right. All right, Internet Governance Forum. There we are, the national and regional IGFs. So as I said, there's some all around the world, and some of them have gone face to face. And then, of course, there is this struggle between multilateral and multi-stakeholder processes. And the multi-stakeholder process is one which I mentioned has governments, businesses, civil society, individual users, and any other stakeholders working together. In multilateral systems, what you have is governments speaking to governments, businesses to businesses, etc. And some, much of what's going on often also takes place in a multilateral basis. The problem is that sometimes decisions are taken without consultation and without the full knowledge of what the consequences might be of what's done. And this is why I would really favor multi-stakeholder processes, so we don't make the mistake of going in one direction. The difficulty then when you have many people around the table is that it does take time to reach consensus, but when the consensus is reached, then really we've looked at all the different angles. Are all the stakeholders funded? That's one of the challenges. We have to find a solution to this, because otherwise you end up with just a small group of people. Now, the next thing I have on the slide is usually the whole breadth of how many things are happening around the world, how many meetings are happening around the world. And of course, this is all pre-pandemic. Now it's all gone online. So there are less of them, but there is more opportunity for people to take part in them because the majority of them are open for everyone to subscribe to. So that was back in 2019. There are tons of challenges that we're faced with. One is, of course, my inability to provide a presentation without the slide deck crashing, but fragmentation, regulation, control, and encryption, all that are huge challenges that we're all faced with on the net today. So the whole field of internet governance and discussion is huge. Cybersecurity has become really enormous with the recent COVID pandemic, because of the fact that there's been a lot of increase in cyber criminal activity. But everything else here is very important. And I'm going to go back to the first slide, which was the one about the waves of internet governance. And yesterday I spoke to the North American School of Internet Governance, and I actually focused on one more wave, which the previous ones I copied blatantly from Professor Volkan Kleinwächter, but this one I've added now, and that's the wave 6. Anything goes. 2020 onwards is now like anything. So many things are happening. We have to do something about it. And this is I think it's a dangerous moment we're going through because of the fact that the world has changed so much. A number of governments and organizations are thinking we need to do something about stuff we haven't done things about for a long time. Now, I don't mind when it comes down to really pushing for accessibility and pushing the internet for everyone to be able to use it. But what we've seen now is the response from some governments and organizations which are there to try and beef up the security of the network, with sometimes trying to crack an egg with a sledgehammer, do too much. The NIS2 directive is a directive by the European Commission to beef up the security of networks and information systems. And unfortunately, the way they've written it, it's become so difficult for small companies to follow that all they're going to be able to do is to break the market or keep the market for the huge players like the GAFAs, the Google, the Apples, the Facebooks, who can plow money into that. But the smaller players are going to have a real problem being able to follow. And if you're a smaller player, you might not need the same level of cybersecurity. There's also a response by many governments now these days saying, oh, there's so much cyber criminality going on out there. We need to weaken encryption. This is the one thing that if we weaken encryption, we'll be able to catch all the criminals out there. Well, the internet is the reflection of the real world, and we've never been able to catch all the criminals out in the streets. Even though now we have cameras everywhere, we're still not able to catch them. So how would they do that here? And the implications for weakening encryption is that legitimate uses of encryption will be heavily impacted. Privacy, freedom of speech, security of transactions, trust and identity. So we need to do things, but we have to make sure we're not going to break things that have worked well. We have to educate people to make sure they don't get caught by all of this criminal activity that takes place out there. And of course, malware and ransomware being one of them, where you receive an email and you get told, oh, you forgot to renew your subscription, press here, you type in your details, and then it locks your computer and asks for your money. That's stuff that everyone receives these days. And so you educate people to avoid being caught by that. And I didn't mention mutually agreed norms of routing security, but for network operators, it's really important that they follow those norms so that their network is more difficult to hack by cyber criminals. Of course, engage in all those processes: ICANN, IETF, everything else. And it's done. Happy to answer questions. I don't know how well I did or bad on the timing.
Yeah, you were good on time, sir. I don't see any questions in this chat box, but you can stay back for 5 minutes. If anyone has some questions, they can type in the chat box, and Dr. Olivia will be happy to address them. And thank you, Dr. Olivia, for taking us through an interesting journey of evolution of internet and summarizing this journey of internet governance of years in such a short span of time.